I knew something was wrong the second the taxi turned onto the bluff road, and I saw strangers carrying furniture out of my beach villa. At first, my brain refused to process it. The late afternoon sun glared off the ocean, the wind whipped my hair across my face, and for a moment I truly thought I'd hallucinated the whole scene after an 8-hour flight from Paris. But then a mover stepped aside, revealing a box in his arms, my box, my handwriting in black marker across the side. My handwriting. I froze on the sidewalk, suitcase still rolling behind me, until it toppled over onto the sand-dusted pavement. Another man waved a clipboard at me as casually as a grocery clerk. "You Isabella Hayes," he called out. When I nodded, he didn't even blink. "We were told to clear out your villa. New owners get the keys tonight." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. New owners. My villa. My $5 million oceanfront home. The one my grandmother left me. The one I worked 2 jobs to maintain when I was 23. The one that kept me sane on the worst nights of my life. And just as I opened my mouth to speak, my phone chimed a message from my mother. So sharp it felt like glass sliding under my skin. I didn't read it at first. My hands were shaking too badly. The movers kept working around me, stacking my life into neat cardboard tombs on the sidewalk. The sea breeze tasted like salt and panic. When I finally swiped open the screen, the text lit up bright white and cruel. "Don't be dramatic. We sold it. Your sister needed help. You can figure out where to stay tonight." A second bubble appeared instantly. "Welcome to the real world, homeless girl." The ground felt like it tilted beneath me, but the world didn't stop. Waves kept crashing. Seagulls kept screaming overhead. A woman jogged by without even glancing in my direction. I wanted to scream at the sky, or at the movers, or at my phone, anything to release the pressure building inside my chest. But I just stood there holding my suitcase handle, with numb fingers staring at a house that somehow no longer belonged to me. The mover with the clipboard softened his voice. "Rough day, huh? Rough didn't begin to cover it." I forced a breath and managed, Can you give me a minute?" He nodded and stepped back. I walked toward the edge of the bluff where the railing overlooked the endless Pacific. The sunset looked like a painting, all gold and coral orange, too beautiful to belong in this moment. My throat tightened so sharply I pressed my palm against it. Homeless. They called me homeless. They sold the only thing in the world that was mine while I was thousands of miles away at a business conference in Paris. I dialed my mother before I could think better of it. She answered on the first ring, her tone clipped and irritated, as if I were the one inconveniencing her. "You there yet?" she asked. "Good. Saves me the trouble of explaining." "Mom," I whispered. "What did you do?" "What we had to do," she snapped. Savannah was drowning Isabella. Drowning in debt. She could have been hurt. And you, Miss Perfect Career, could afford to help. You didn't need that villa. My grip on the phone tightened. "You sold my home. Oh, stop it." Her voice dripped disdain. "You're one person. Savannah wants a family someday. She needs stability. You always said you didn't want to be tied down." I laughed softly, bitterly. "That changes nothing." My father's voice cut in speakerphone. "Listen to your mother. This is for the good of the family." There it was. The phrase they'd thrown at me my entire life, like a commandment carved into stone. "The good of the family. You threw me out," I said quietly. "You took the one thing Grandma left me and sold it behind my back. I never agreed to this. Well, my mother said that's why we used the document, the power of attorney you signed when you had surgery at 24. Thankfully, we updated it." I stopped breathing. "Updated without me? Oh, don't start. You always overreact. This is why we don't involve you. You get emotional." The word emotional hit harder than any slap could have. My parents always wielded it like a weapon. Dismissal disguised as concern. Control disguised as guidance. "Where's Savannah?" I asked. A too bright voice chimed in instantly. "Right here, Izzy," she said, as if she hadn't just blown up my life. "Honestly, you should be thanking us. If I had declared bankruptcy, the whole family would have suffered. This helped everyone, including you. Think of it as a fresh start. You can travel work from anywhere. I had a home, I said. Now I don't, she groaned. You're so dramatic. I stepped back from the railing, feeling something inside me shift, not a break, but a clean, precise crack that let the truth slide into place. You all decided my life didn't matter, I said. Oh, stop it, my mother snapped again. We're your parents. We know what's best for you. No, I whispered. You know what's convenient for you. There was a long silence before Savannah spoke again, her voice suddenly sharp. Well, the new owners move in today, so if you want your things, you'd better get them before dark. Behind me, the movers continued, lifting boxes into the truck, my clothes, my books, my couch, the quilt my grandmother made me when I was 8. I inhaled slowly. Mom, Dad, Savannah. Yes, my mother said impatiently. You didn't sell what you think you sold. Silence. Confusion. A sharp inhale. My father scoffed. What are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough, I said. Isabella Savannah barked. Don't be cryptic, just say it. No, I said. Not today. I hung up before any of them could say another word. For a long moment I stood perfectly still, letting the wind whip my hair, letting the truth settle into my bones. They had committed fraud. They had sold a trust property they had no right to touch. They had called me homeless. They had mocked me, stolen from me, dismissed me, erased me. But they didn't know the trust terms. They didn't know the signatures required. They didn't know what I'd protected. They didn't know I wasn't alone in this. I turned back to the movers. Load everything into storage, I said. I'll send the address. He nodded sympathetically. Family trouble, I almost smiled. You have no idea. I stepped away from the villa, away from the bluff, away from everything that had just been stripped from me. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts, and tapped a name I hadn't used in 3 years. Lydia Monroe, attorney. When she answered, I didn't hesitate. My parents sold my $5 million villa while I was in Paris, I said. They forged my signature. And I need your help. There was a brief beat of silence. Then Lydia said, voice steady and sharp as steel, Isabella, listen carefully. Do not speak to them again. Not one word. I'm pulling up the trust documents now. A breath left my lungs, the first clean one since I'd stepped out of the taxi. Good, I said, because they have no idea what they've just started. I walked into the motel room and shut the door behind me, locking it twice before I let my back slide down the wood until I sat on the stained carpet. For a long moment I didn't move. My suitcase lay open on the bed, still half-packed with dresses from Paris, each one now mocking me with the memory of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old air freshener, a far cry from the jasmine candles and sea breeze that had always filled my villa. This room wasn't a home. It wasn't anything. It was a place to breathe until I figured out how to fix the disaster my family had detonated. The moment I could feel my fingers again, I climbed onto the bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened my secure vault. Lydia had taught me years ago to save every important document digitally just in case, she'd said. I never imagined just in case would turn into this. My hands still trembled as I clicked open the trust folder. The first page hit me like a punch. Beneficiary Isabella Marie Hayes. My full name, my grandmother's handwriting scanned in the margin from when she revised it the last time. My vision blurred. Co-signature required for liquidation. Successor rights, not transferable without beneficiary approval. They never had the authority, not even close. They hadn't just crossed a boundary, they had launched themselves into another universe of violation. As I scrolled through the wording, a strange mixture of fury and clarity rose in me. All these years my parents had acted like they were entitled to my life, my success, my money. They believed they were allowed to direct it, shape it, use it. They believed I would never fight back. A notification pinged. A new text. Unknown number. Call me when you're ready. L. Lydia. I hit dial immediately. She answered on the first ring. Isabella, yes. I've reviewed the trust. Legally, the property is yours. You're protected. But this is going to get far uglier before it gets better. My throat tightened. They can't keep the sale right. They can't keep the money. No, but they've already misrepresented facts to the buyers. That's fraud. And if they forged your signature, which from what you told me is likely, we're stepping into criminal territory. I'll need evidence. I swallowed hard. What do I do tonight? Rest if you can. Tomorrow morning you come to my office. And Isabella, her voice softened just slightly. Do not respond to anything your family says. Silence is your advantage now. I wanted to trust her. I needed to. So I whispered, okay, and hung up. I set the laptop aside and lay back on the stiff motel bed. The springs groaned beneath me, complaining like they were unused to supporting someone who just had their life ripped out from under them. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly, but the air felt too thin. My phone buzzed again, then again, then again. At first I ignored it, but after the fifth buzz I reached for the screen. Mom, Dad, Savannah, missed calls, texts, voice memos. A barrage of familial desperation disguised as righteousness. The newest message glowed bright. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. Mom, harder. As if they were the ones suffering. Another message. You're acting ungrateful. Dad, ungrateful. That word, God. How many times had they used it to silence me, to make me feel guilty for wanting boundaries? I dropped the phone onto the blanket and stared at the ceiling. For a moment I felt nothing. Then everything poured in at once, betrayal, grief, shock, anger, all tangling into a storm inside my ribs. Another ping. Another. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed the phone. A voice memo from my father. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. Isabella, stop with the dramatics. You're 30. You can rent a place. Your sister needed us. She could have been hurt. You should understand this is your fault for not helping her when you had the chance. I hit stop so hard my finger hurt. My father's voice had always been steady, authoritative, commanding. Hearing it twisted into something manipulative and dismissive made the floor tilt under me again. They didn't just take my home. They dismantled my reality piece by piece until I didn't know which memories still belonged to me. I needed something solid. Something factual, something that didn't bend under their cruelty. I reopened the laptop and pulled up the real estate records I'd downloaded earlier. Something had felt wrong the first time I glanced through them, something I hadn't had the clarity to face until now. There it was. The sale price. Far below market value. Insultingly low, especially for Ocean Crest, where beachfront properties sold out before they even hit the listings. No way this went through legitimately in 48 hours unless someone pushed it, someone desperate, someone who didn't care about legality. My family. My heart hammered in my throat as I clicked the buyer's contact information. I hesitated only a moment before pressing dial. The phone rang 4 times before a cautious male voice answered. Hello, this is Isabella Hayes, I said, embracing the truth of my own name in a way I never had before. The former owner of the Ocean Crest Villa. A pause. A long one. Yes, he said slowly. We were wondering when you would call. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean I'm sorry for what you're going through, he said gently. We were told you were fully aware of the sale, that you approved everything. My mouth went dry. I didn't, he exhaled sharply. We suspected something was off. Your parents were extremely pushy. They insisted on immediate signing. They brought a notary. They said you were emotionally unstable. The word landed like a slap. Emotionally unstable. The same narrative they used to silence me whenever I pushed back. The same justification they used for every controlling decision they made. Do you still have the emails, I asked? My voice shook. Yes, he said. We saved everything. If you need them for legal reasons, we'll cooperate. I closed my eyes. Relief and fury twisted together. Thank you, I do. We hung up. I sat there in the dim motel room, listening to the hum of the ancient mini-fridge and the unsteady beat of my own heart. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd rewritten who I was, told strangers I was unstable, unfit to manage my own affairs. They had weaponized the very image of me to justify their crime. I opened a new email and sent everything to Lydia. Her reply came seconds later. Good. Rest now. Tomorrow we start. Rest. Funny word. I doubted I'd sleep at all. But I lay down anyway, pulling the stiff blanket up to my chin. The room was too quiet. My thoughts were too loud. Somewhere in the darkness, between one breath and the next, a truth surfaced. My family had always relied on me to fall in line, to give, to forgive, to sacrifice. But I wasn't that daughter anymore. Tomorrow I would fight. Tomorrow everything would change. I barely slept. When the motel clock clicked from 5:58 to 5:59, I was already sitting upright on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, hair pulled back into a low-twist, laptop zipped into my bag. My eyes burned, not from tears. I didn't have any left, but from a night spent replaying every moment my family had ever called me dramatic, sensitive, difficult, ungrateful. Words that once kept me small but now only made me sharper. By 7:30, I was standing outside Lydia Monroe's office downtown. The glass building rose high above Austin's morning traffic steel and blue-tinted windows catching the rising sun. A part of me still expected to wake up in my villa to warm light on white curtains, to the sound of waves hitting the shore. But this was reality now, concrete, cold, and unforgiving, and I had to match it. Inside, a receptionist led me down a long hallway to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Lydia stood at the far end, already flipping through a stack of files. Her slate-gray suit made her look like an anchor in the middle of a storm. "You look like you slept 20 minutes, she said, raising an eyebrow. "Try 0. She nodded, once approving. "Good. Anger keeps people honest. Sit." I obeyed. The chair felt too soft, dangerously comforting. I needed the discomfort. I needed the reminder that I was here because my family had stolen something irreplaceable. Lydia slid a thick binder across the table. "This is everything we know so far. Trust documents, transaction logs, the preliminary notes from the buyers. We need to establish a clear pattern before we take the first legal step." My pulse quickened. "What do you need from me? Start from the beginning," she said. "Every time they asked for money, every time something felt off, every time Savannah mentioned debt, every time your parents deflected or lied. I need the full picture." So I told her. Not the timeline I'd rehearsed in my head overnight, but the real one. The one I'd spent years minimizing. The late-night phone calls asking for a small favor, the sudden withdrawals from my joint emergency account with my mother that I was told were for medical bills but turned out to be for Savannah's speeding tickets. The months when I paid utilities for their house just until Dad's bonus came in. Every decision I made that I thought was generosity but was really compliance. Lydia didn't interrupt. She took notes in precise, controlled strokes. When I finished, she set the pen down. "Isabella," she said softly, "this wasn't one betrayal. This was a long-term pattern of financial and emotional exploitation." A lump formed in my throat. "I let them do it for years." "No," her tone hardened. "They conditioned you to believe that compliance was love." My chest tightened at the accuracy of it. It was the kind of truth that didn't just hit it, lodged itself inside you, refusing to be ignored. Before I could respond, Lydia tapped the binder. "You mentioned something felt wrong about the sale price." "You were right. A villa in Ocean Crest doesn't sell at that number, not in 48 hours. That means intentional fraud." "Can we reverse it?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said. "But it's going to be a war, not a conversation." I swallowed. "What now?" Before she could answer, her paralegal, Carrie, hurried in and handed Lydia a tablet. "We just received something from the buyers," she said. "You'll want to see this." Lydia tapped the screen. An email popped open. My breath caught. It was a screenshot of a message thread between my parents and the realtor. I scanned it once, twice, then a third time, just to make sure I wasn't trapped in some nightmare. Mom, she won't question paperwork. She's always traveling. Dad, tell the buyers she's emotionally fragile. We'll handle signatures. Mom, she doesn't need a property that big. This helps everyone. My hands curled into fists. They dehumanized me, I whispered. They talked about me like I was a liability. Lydia leaned back in her seat, tone cold. They weaponized your reliability. If they could portray you as unstable or irresponsible legally or socially, it made their fraud easier to justify. A sharp knock sounded from the door, and Carrie stepped back in this time with a file labeled Preliminary Transfer Audit. You'll want to see this too, she said, then left. Lydia opened the file, her eyes narrowing. Well, she murmured, this is interesting. She rotated the file so it faced me. At first it just looked like rows of numbers. Then I saw the labels. Withdrawal, $280. Family emergency withdrawal, $295. Loan settlement transfer, $1 Sav Fund 1 after another spanning 9 months. All from my account. They've been draining you, Lydia said. Small enough amounts to stay under fraud detection thresholds. Long enough to be deliberate. I felt sick. I never authorized any of this. I know. Lydia pointed at the last line. This one was made 2 days before the sale. While you were in Paris, a hollow ache spread through my chest. They'd planned this. For months. Maybe years. I pressed both hands against my eyes until the burn dulled. How could they do this to me? Lydia's voice softened. Because they assumed you wouldn't question them. Before the silence could swallow me, Lydia straightened. There's more. The buyers mentioned the notary wasn't independent. What does that mean? It means we need to talk to him. And the realtor. And then we subpoena your parents. But first her office door opened again. A tall man with silver hair and a leather briefcase walked in. Lydia introduced him. This is Dr. Marcus Ellery, forensic document analyst. He nodded at me. Miss Hayes, I've reviewed the signatures. My stomach clenched. And he opened his briefcase, pulling out 2 enlarged prints, one of my real signature one, from the supposed updated power of attorney my parents had used. He placed them side by side. You see here, he said, pointing at a delicate tremor near the H in Hayes. This is hesitation. Your natural signature doesn't have hesitation, he pointed again. And this curve copied too slowly. Not fluid. The pressure is uneven. He looked up. This was traced, not written. The room tilted for a moment. Savannah. Savannah, who could copy anyone's handwriting since she was 10. Savannah, who forged our parents' signatures on school notes for fun. Savannah, who always said she just had a steady hand. I exhaled shakily. My sister forged it. It's highly probable, Dr. Ellery said, and if needed I can testify. Lydia closed the folder with deliberate force. Then that decides it. Tomorrow morning we file for an emergency injunction. If granted, their accounts freeze. They won't be able to move a cent. The thought of it should have satisfied me. But all I felt was the crushing weight of betrayal. What if... I swallowed, hating the way my voice cracked. What if they say I'm overreacting? What if they try to spin this as family drama? Lydia gave me a long, steady look. They will, and you'll ignore it. Because this isn't drama. This is fraud. I nodded. As I gathered my bag to leave, Lydia added one more thing. They're going to try to contact you tonight. Don't engage. I forced a weak smile. I've learned my lesson. But the truth, I wasn't prepared for what came next. Not 10 minutes after I stepped into the cool evening air outside Lydia's building, my phone vibrated. Savannah. Calling. I declined. Mom. Declined. Dad. Declined. Then came the text from Savannah. Stop this. Another. You're going to regret it. Another. Everything is your fault. My hand shook not with fear but with something colder. Something stronger. I typed one reply, then deleted it. Then turned off my phone completely. Let them panic. Let them feel a fraction of what they'd put me through. I walked toward the bus stop, the city lights glowing against the dusk, and whispered to no one but the night. They wanted a fight. I'll give them one. The motel room felt even smaller in the morning light, like the walls had crept closer during the night. I stood at the sink, brushing my teeth, staring at the pale, exhausted woman in the mirror. There were shadows under my eyes, and a tightness in my jaw I didn't recognize. I looked like someone who'd been emptied out and refilled with steel. I guess that's what betrayal does. It burns everything soft and leaves only what can survive the fire. By the time I reached Lydia's office, I'd rehearsed what I would say a dozen times, but the moment she saw me walk in, she didn't ask any of it. She simply nodded toward the conference room where stacks of files already covered the table. A legal battlefield waiting to be used. "We have a lot to get through today," she said as she closed the door behind us. "You ready, no?" "Yes." "Good." She clicked her pen. "Let's start with your records. I want to walk through every financial detail before we bring in the analysts." I opened my laptop and slid it toward her. She pulled up the vault documents I'd forwarded last night. With each click, a new window bloomed across the screen bank. Statements, trust language, archived emails, screenshots. Evidence. My new vocabulary. "Here," I said, pointing. "This was the earliest suspicious withdrawal I can find. 8 months ago." Lydia traced her finger over the lines. $280. Labeled, family emergency. "There was no emergency," I said. "They made it up." She nodded. Classic pattern. Smaller amounts first. Test the boundaries. See how much they can take before you notice. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. They must have thought I wouldn't check. They were counting on it. She clicked on to the next page. 8 more withdrawals, slightly larger. Same label, same pattern. I watched her expression sharpen with each one. This wasn't just a lawyer reviewing documents, this was a strategist preparing for war. A knock sounded at the door. Lydia didn't look up. "Come in." Patrice Langford stepped inside, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she had seen every type of financial scam humans were capable of. She carried a laptop and a folder thick enough to make my stomach tighten. "This is the preliminary audit," Patrice said, handing the folder to Lydia. "There's more here than we expected." My heart thudded. "More." Patrice opened her laptop and turned it toward me. "Look." Rows of transactions filled the screen. A dizzying map of bank activity, some labeled with vague descriptions, some coded, some not labeled at all. "This one," Patrice said, tapping the screen, "is a direct payment to a Nevada casino app, $1,500. And this," she added, swiping, "is a payment to a predatory lender. Another $2,100. "Savannah," I whispered. "Likely," Patrice said. "But there's more. They used your account as collateral on a third-party loan." I jerked upright. "What? Without my signature?" "That's the point," Patrice said. "They used the forged POA. It's the only way they could have done it." My chest tightened, fury mixing with disbelief. "My family took out loans." "In my name, yes," Patrice replied calmly. "And they were doing it long before the villa sale. It felt like someone had tilted the room." I pressed my palms against the table, trying to ground myself. Lydia closed the folder and leaned forward. "Isabella, look at me." I forced myself to meet her eyes. "This is not a case of a family making a bad decision. This is systematic, planned, coordinated, and illegal." I nodded slowly. "I understand." Patrice watched me for a moment, then added, "There's one more thing." The tone of her voice made the hair on the back of my neck rise. "What we found, a hidden account," she said simply. "Opened 3 years ago, under your mother's name, but funded entirely by transfers from your savings." My breath caught. 3 years ago, that's when Savannah started her first big debt spiral," Lydia murmured. "Your parents must have opened it then." I pressed a hand over my mouth. 3 years. 3 years of siphoning. 3 years of lies. My phone buzzed on the table. Lydia glanced at it. You don't have to look, but I did. Savannah, you're ruining everything. Answer your phone. Another ping. Mom, please call us. We need to talk. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion. Family handles things privately. My fingers clenched around the phone until my knuckles whitened. They're not going to stop, I whispered. No, Lydia said. Because they think they still control you. I set the phone down. They don't. Not anymore. Another knock. This time, Lydia stood. That'll be him. She opened the door and Dr. Marcus Ellery walked in holding a portfolio case. His silver hair shone under the overhead lights, and his measured steps filled the room with an air of precision. He nodded at me. Miss Hayes. I reviewed the POA document, and he unfastened the portfolio and lifted out 2 enlarged signature prints, the real one from my trust signing at 24, and the one forged onto the updated POA. Putting them side by side, he said, the differences are obvious, even to an untrained eye. He pointed with a fine-tipped pen. Here the hesitation. Here the pressure inconsistency. Here the unnatural slope. He tapped the forged one. Someone traced this. The words hit harder than I expected. Sabotage, I whispered. Not sabotage, Dr. Ellery corrected softly. Forgery. Silence tightened around us. Lydia broke it. We need to move. If this is what they're willing to do behind your back, then the next steps are non-negotiable. She pulled a stack of papers from her folder and placed them in front of me. This is the injunction request. Once we file it all, accounts connected to the villa sale freeze automatically. They won't be able to use a cent, Patrice added. If they've moved money already, we'll trace it. If they've spent it, they'll owe it. I stared at the document. My name printed clearly across the top, my signature line below. Are you ready for this? Lydia asked quietly. My mind flicked through 1,000 memories, family vacations, Christmas dinners, Savannah's teenage tantrums, my mother's tight smiles, my father's disappointed sighs, a lifetime of manipulation dressed as love. I lifted the pen. Yes, I said, I'm ready. And I signed. The moment the pen left the paper, something inside me shifted. A weight I'd carried my entire life loosened just enough for me to breathe. Lydia gathered the stack with practiced efficiency. Good. I'll file first thing in the morning. But Isabella, brace yourself. Once they find out the accounts are frozen, things will escalate. They've already started escalating, I said quietly. As if summoned, my phone vibrated again. 4 missed calls from Mom. A text from Dad. You'll regret this. Pick up. Then one from Savannah. You think you're better than us. You're pathetic. I exhaled slowly and turned the phone face down. Lydia touched my shoulder lightly. They're losing control. That's why they're panicking. I know. Don't reply. Don't justify anything. Keep everything. Screenshots, messages, voicemails. We're building a case and they're giving us evidence. I nodded. When I finally stepped out of Lydia's office, building the sky over Austin had turned a dusky blue, the sun slipping low behind the skyline. Traffic hummed in the distance. The wind brushed cool against my skin. For the first time in days, I inhaled fully, deeply. Not because everything was fine, because for the first time the truth was finally on my side. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. And I wasn't walking into it as their obedient daughter. I was walking into it as myself. The conference room felt colder than the rest of Lydia's office, like the air conditioning had been set a few degrees too low on purpose. Maybe it was just my nerves. Maybe it was the stack of files on the table thick enough to bury the last remnants of denial I still had. Or maybe it was the 2 people waiting inside, experts whose entire job was to pull apart lies and uncover the kind of truth my family never thought I'd have the courage to face. Dr. Marcus Ellery sat at the far end, adjusting the magnifier on his glasses. Patrice Langford, the financial investigator, was scrolling through a spreadsheet on her tablet. Both looked up when I entered. Both had the calm, clinical demeanor of people who spend their lives examining the wreckage other people leave behind. Lydia motioned for me to sit. Today, she said, we dissect everything. I lowered myself into the chair, the leather creaking under me. My heart beat loud and steady in my ears, not frantic like before, more like a drum, announcing something heavy was about to begin. Let's start with the signature, Lydia said. Dr. Ellery opened a folder and spread out several glossy prints. At first they looked like abstract art lines, curves, pressure points. But I recognized the familiar patterns instantly. My signature, or rather, attempts at it. This is your real one, he said, pointing to the long, fluid stroke of my name the way I've always written it. And this? He tapped another print where the line trembled slightly. This is the one on the updated power of attorney. He didn't need to explain. The hesitation marks were obvious even to me. Little dots of uncertainty where the pen had paused too long. Lines that should have curved smoothly, but instead dipped subtly, as if the person drawing them had to think about each stroke. This signature wasn't written, Dr. Ellery said calmly. It was drawn. The words slid across the table like ice. Drawn, I repeated. Yes, traced, he pointed again. Notice the inconsistent pressure, the uneven slant. Whoever did this carefully replicated your strokes, but slowly. It's classic forgery. My stomach flipped. Savannah. I didn't say her name out loud, but everyone in the room felt the implication. My sister, who used to copy my handwriting for fun. My sister, whose talent my parents always praised. I pressed my lips together until I felt the sting. So this wasn't an accident, no, Lydia said. This was deliberate. I wanted to feel anger. I wanted it to burn. But what I felt instead was something quieter, heavier. Grief. Let's move on, Lydia said gently, as if sensing I needed structure to stay upright. Patrice. The financial investigator tapped her tablet and a spreadsheet appeared on the wall screen behind her. Lines of numbers, columns of dates. A visual map of betrayal. What you're looking at is the activity from your primary savings account over the last 14 months, she said. These withdrawals, always under $300, were intentionally kept small to avoid triggering fraud alerts. I leaned forward. 14 months, Patrice nodded. Yes, and the pattern is consistent. Every 2 to 3 weeks without your authorization. Each line hit like a blow, $260. Family emergency, $295. Loan settlement, $210. Emergency transport, $280. Household maintenance, all lies. All from my account. Patrice clicked again. A new tab opened. This, she said, is a secondary account labeled Family Emergency Fund. Records show that 100% of the deposits came from your accounts. Meanwhile, 80% of withdrawals went to your sister. A cold shiver crawled down my back. So they weren't helping her. They were using me to help her. Exactly, Patrice said. And it gets worse. Her finger slid across the tablet, opening yet another file, this one, with red flags on several transactions. Here, she said, pointing at one. Payments to 2 Nevada casinos. My breath hitched. Savannah. And here, she continued, a $12,000 loan from a predatory lender with 24% interest. My vision blurred. A low buzz filled my ears. That loan, Patrice added softly, was taken out under the assumption you would cover it. I clenched my hands together in my lap nails, digging into my palms. So they made me her safety net. They made you the entire net, Lydia corrected. Patrice wasn't finished. One more discovery, she said. A bank account your parents opened 3 years ago under your mother's name with an email labeled Sav Support at. All deposits came from transfers originating in your accounts. 3 years. 3 years of siphoned funds. 3 years of smiling to my face while robbing me behind my back. I sucked in a breath that didn't feel like enough air. How did I not see this? Because you trusted them, Lydia said quietly, and trust makes people look away from red flags. There was a soft knock on the door. Carrie poked her head inside. The buyers sent something else, she said, handing a large envelope to Lydia. They said it was urgent. Lydia opened it and pulled out a printed email thread. As soon as I saw the first line, the air left my lungs. Realtor. Should we reach out to Isabella regarding the sale? Mom, no need. She doesn't understand real estate. We're handling everything. She's too emotional for this process. Dad, she won't be participating. She's unstable under pressure. We'll sign on her behalf. My throat closed around a sound I couldn't name. They said I was unstable, I whispered. Lydia's jaw tightened. They misrepresented your mental state to push the sale through. That alone is grounds for misrepresentation and fraudulent inducement, Patrice added, and the buyers suspected something was off. They're willing to testify. The room tilted again. I reached for the edge of the table to steady myself. Isabella. Lydia, said, her voice gentle but firm. I blinked rapidly, trying to anchor myself in the present. They didn't just steal your home, she said. They assassinated your character to justify it. That did it. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Not the messy, broken kind of crying, just a single drop carrying too much truth. I wiped it away. Okay, I whispered. What do we do now? Lydia tapped her pen, once decisive. We file the injunction tomorrow. We freeze their accounts. Then we subpoena the realtor, the notary, and your parents. And Savannah, I asked. If she forged the signature, Lydia said, she will be held accountable. A strange calm washed over me, like the eye of a hurricane settling briefly above my chest. Good, I said. As we wrapped up, Patrice gathered her files. Dr. Ellery packed his magnifiers. Lydia organized the binder into clean, brutal sections: trust, fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, abuse. I stood feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. Before I reached the door, Lydia said, One more thing, brace yourself. When we file the injunction, they'll know, and they'll come after you emotionally. They already have, I said, as if on cue. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I didn't even flinch. I met Lydia's eyes. I'm not afraid of them anymore. She nodded. Then you're ready. Outside, the sun was setting, streaking the sky with gold and coral, almost the same colors I'd seen on the day everything fell apart. But instead of feeling like the world was ending, it felt like the world was preparing. Preparing for truth, preparing for justice, preparing for war. And for the first time since returning from Paris, I felt something close to power rising in my chest. The motel walls felt thinner that night, like sound could pass through them without resistance. Every vibration from my phone seemed to echo against the cheap headboard. I sat cross-legged on the stiff bed, the stack of files from Lydia's office spread around me like a shield. But no matter how many documents I surrounded myself with, I couldn't drown out the storm happening on the screen in front of me. My family was spiraling. The first call came at 8:41 p.m., then another at 8:43, then a third at 8:46. I didn't answer. When the ringing finally stopped, a text appeared. Mom, you're blowing this way out of proportion. We need to talk like adults. Then my father, Dad, pick up the phone. You owe us that much. Then Savannah, don't pretend you're some victim. You left me with no choice. I turned the phone face down and stared at the peeling wallpaper. For a long moment I just breathed. Slow, steady, controlled. The way Lydia told me to. But the silence didn't last long. The screen lit up again, vibrating across the blanket. 4 unread messages. The last one from my mother. If you go through with this, Isabella, you'll regret it more than we will. A tremor rippled through my chest, not fear. Something sharper, something that felt like awakening. I picked the phone back up and opened the messages one by one, not because I wanted to read them, but because Lydia told me to save everything. Evidence. My mother's tone was cold-clipped, calculated. My father's was self-righteous, wounded. Savannah's was pure venom. Savannah, great job turning our family into a circus. Savannah, I swear if you ruin my life, Savannah, you think you're better than us. You've always thought that. Every word was exactly what they needed not to say. I forwarded each message to Lydia with a single note adding to the file. A few seconds later, she replied, "Good. Don't answer anything." I typed back, "I won't." The phone buzzed again, this time a voice. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, low and simmering with anger. "Isabella, stop this. You're acting like a child. We didn't steal anything. We did what any parents would do. We stepped in when you refused to help your sister. You should be grateful we even bothered explaining ourselves. Enough with the dramatics. Pick up the phone." I pressed stop. The silence afterward felt hollow. If I'd heard that voicemail 5 years ago, I would have apologized. If I'd heard it 3 years ago, I would have tried to negotiate. If I'd heard it last year, I would have cried. But now it didn't break me. It clarified me. A knock startled me upright. 3 firm raps on the door. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. Another knock, slightly louder. My heartbeat jumped. For a moment, an irrational fear crept in, the kind that whispers worst-case scenarios in your ear. I approached the door, slowly peering through the peephole. It was the front desk clerk, a young guy I'd barely spoken to, holding a small envelope. I cracked the door open an inch. "Yes, this was dropped off for you," he said. "No name, just your room number." My skin prickled. "Did you see who left it?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am, sorry." I took the envelope and locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, just one sentence written in my mother's handwriting. "You should have done more to help your sister. What happens next is on you." I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The room tilted slightly, the hum of the mini-fridge suddenly too loud. For a long time I just stared at the paper, reading the sentence over and over. Was this a threat? A warning? A manipulation attempt? All of the above. My fingers curled around the edge of the page until it crumpled. Then I smoothed it out, took a photo, and sent it to Lydia. 3 dots appeared immediately. "Lydia, do not delete the original. Keep it. This helps us." Another text followed seconds later. "And do not under any circumstances respond to your family tonight. I mean it." I exhaled. Okay, fine. I could do silence. But they couldn't. At 10:12 p.m., my phone chimed again. Another text from my father. "Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. This is not how family handles conflict." Then my mother, "Mom, if you freeze our accounts, we won't survive this. Do you want that on your conscience?" Then Savannah again. "Savannah, you're pathetic. I needed you. And you abandoned me." I let the messages pile up without opening them. Around midnight, the buzzing stopped. The motel room settled into quiet for the first time since I walked in that afternoon. But the stillness didn't soothe me. It sharpened me. Because silence from them didn't mean calm. It meant planning, plotting, waiting for my next move. I walked to the small dresser and pulled out my laptop. If they were going to spend the night twisting reality, I was going to spend it strengthening my truth. I opened the digital vault again. Emails, bank transfers, screenshots, the forensic signature files, the forged POA, the buyer's messages. Evidence layered on evidence. With every document, I read a new piece of clarity slid into place. This wasn't an impulsive act by desperate parents. This was a pattern, a strategy. Years of conditioning, years of entitlement, years of treating my stability like their resource. At 1:26 a.m., my phone buzzed one last time. A voice memo from Savannah. Against all reason, I pressed play. Her voice was shaking, not with regret, but outrage. "Do you get how selfish you are? Mom and Dad are falling apart, and it's all because you can't just let things go for once in your perfect life? You always acted like you were above the rest of us. Well, guess what you're not. You're alone in some garbage motel and you deserve it." The recording clicked off. I stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Savannah had just given Lydia exactly what she needed. Direct evidence of emotional coercion, guilt manipulation, and intent. I typed a message to Lydia, forwarding voice memo. They're unraveling, she responded instantly. Good, let them unravel. The more they show their true colors, the stronger our case becomes. I set the phone aside and finally lay down. Sleep didn't come easily. It didn't come at all, actually, but something else did. Resolve. If my family wanted a war, they were finally learning something they'd never bothered to understand. I don't lose quietly. And tomorrow morning, when Lydia filed the injunction that would freeze every account they touched, the battle would truly begin. I wasn't the daughter they could control anymore. I wasn't the safety net they could pull tighter. I wasn't the resource they could drain. I was done. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what they'd do next. They should have been afraid of what I would. The hallway outside Lydia's office smelled faintly of paper, old carpet, and burnt coffee, the scent of 1,000 tense mornings. I tightened my grip on the travel mug she'd handed me earlier, lukewarm chamomile sloshing gently against the lid. My pulse thudded in my throat, steady but heavy, as if my body already understood the gravity of what today meant. The injunction hearing was in less than an hour. "Come on in," Lydia said when I approached the conference room. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried that purposeful intensity that always settled me. "We need to go over everything one more time before we head to the courthouse." I stepped inside, and the sight of the room took my breath for a moment. The long conference table was covered with files, color-coded tabs, binders, and printouts. A whiteboard stood against the wall, filled with names, numbers, arrows, legal terms, and highlighted connections. It looked less like preparation and more like a full war map. "This," I said, exhaling. "This is a lot." "It has to be," Lydia replied. "Your parents aren't amateurs. They've been doing this for a while. But so have we." She motioned toward a chair. "Sit. Let's walk the timeline." I sat down, smoothing my palms along my thighs. My hands were trembling more than I wanted to admit. Patrice entered just then, tapping something into her tablet. "Morning. I've updated the financial flowchart. The judge needs to see it crystal clear." Behind her came Dr. Ellery carrying another portfolio. "And I've printed the side-by-side signature comparisons. No judge with functioning eyesight will mistake the forgery." I swallowed. My life was being dismantled and rebuilt through documents and diagrams and magnified pen strokes. Lydia stood at the head of the table like a general. "Let's begin." She clicked a remote and the monitor lit up with the first slide, the trust original terms. "This is our foundation," she said. "Your villa was placed in a private trust, your grandmother, structured specifically to protect you. Only you as the beneficiary could approve liquidation or transfer." I nodded. "My parents always said it was family property." "That was a lie," she said without hesitation. She clicked again. The next slide, the forged PO. "Their claim relies on this document," she explained. "A supposed update to your medical power of attorney. Except you didn't sign it." Dr. Ellery stepped forward. "If the judge wants verbal confirmation, I'll state it clearly. The signature is drawn, not written. It is a trace deliberately executed to impersonate your handwriting." He tapped the magnified curve of the letter I in my name. "This hesitation mark alone is enough to prove forgery." The screen switched again, financial abuse timeline. Patrice took over. "We follow the money. For 14 months, funds were siphoned from your accounts in small withdrawals. All labeled vaguely, all intentional, and all unnoticed," I murmured. She gave me a sympathetic look. "They counted on that." Another click, hidden accounts. A new timeline appeared, showing 3 separate accounts, one for gambling payments, one for loan settlements, one disguised as a family emergency fund. "All fed by your money," Patrice said. "None authorized by you." The air in the room felt heavy, thick enough to chew. And then Lydia said, clicking the final slide, "We have the sale itself. The rushed transaction, the misrepresented mental state, the manipulation of the Boyers, the notary failure." Everything I'd discovered in the last 72 hours was laid out in one brutal, undeniable line. This, Lydia said, turning to me, is why the injunction will pass. The judge will freeze every account connected to the sale today. I inhaled deeply. They're going to lose it. Of course they will, she replied. You've never told them no before. A sharp knock sounded at the door. Carrie poked her head in. They're here. I blinked. Who? And then they entered. Daniel and Marina, the couple who had tried to buy my villa. They looked nervous, apologetic, and exhausted. Thank you for coming, Lydia said. Daniel nodded. We want to help. We didn't know they were lying. Marina held out a folder. These are emails we received from your mother. She said contacting you would trigger an episode. I clenched my jaw. My mother said that yes, Marina whispered. She insisted you were mentally unwell. My chest tightened. I've never had any mental health episode. Daniel shook his head. We figured that out pretty fast. But the way she spoke about you, we thought it was family drama we shouldn't touch. Lydia took the folder. This is extremely helpful. You're both free to leave if you need, but your testimony, written or verbal, strengthens the injunction. We'll do it, Daniel said. Whatever you need. As they left, silence filled the room again. Lydia turned toward me. Their willingness to cooperate, that's huge. Judges trust neutral third parties. But all I could hear were my mother's lies echoing in my skull. Mentally unwell, emotionally unstable, not competent. They really said I was unfit to handle my own life. I tried to steady my breathing. The air felt thick. Lydia stepped closer. Hey, look at me. I lifted my eyes. You are not what they say you are, she said quietly. You never were. I nodded, but my throat tightened. We need to go, Patrice said, checking the time. If we leave now, we'll get a seat before your parents arrive. The idea made my stomach twist. Face them again. But I stood smoothing my blazer. Let's go. We gathered the binders, the folders, the arsenal of truth built meticulously piece by piece. As we walked through the lobby toward the parking garage, Lydia kept pace beside me. One last reminder, she said. Inside that courtroom, don't respond, don't react, don't look at them unless you must. Let me speak for you. I will, I said. And remember, froze accounts hit hard. They'll panic. They'll lash out. They already have, I murmured. She gave a small, grim smile. Then you know exactly what to expect. We stepped outside into the sunshine, the light almost too bright against the tension in my chest. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't need to check to know who it was. My mother, my father, my sister. The storm was coming. The next hour would change everything. And as we approached Lydia's car, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into a family conflict as the daughter they could manipulate. I was walking in as a woman they had underestimated. And this time their excuses wouldn't save them. Truth would. The moment I stepped out of the car and saw my parents standing by the courthouse entrance, I felt something inside me harden. Not defensively, not fearfully, but with a clarity I hadn't known I was capable of. My mother spotted me first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, her posture straightening like she'd rehearsed it. My father looked furious in that tight, controlled way he used whenever he felt he was losing control. And Savannah? She stood slightly behind them, arms folded, eyes red-rimmed from either crying or anger, probably both. Lydia didn't slow her steps. Do not engage, she murmured. Not one word. I nodded once. My mother hurried forward. Isabella, thank God you're here. We need to talk before this nonsense goes inside. Lydia stepped cleanly between us. Absolutely not, Savannah scoffed. Let the grown-ups handle this, Lydia. Lydia didn't even blink. Terrible choice of words considering the three of you forged a legal document. My father's face reddened. We will speak with our daughter privately. You'll do no such thing, Lydia replied. Back up. He took a step forward anyway, looming, his jaw clenched. I don't care who you think you are. You have turned Isabella against her family. You will answer, for I didn't speak. I didn't move. I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. Lydia lifted one brow. If you take another step toward my client, I will have the bailiff intervene before we even enter the courtroom. Step back. For the first time in my life, I watched my father hesitate. Let's go, Lydia said with a tilt of her head. We walked past them. My mother's voice followed us, trembling brittle. Isabella, sweetheart, don't do this. Please. We're your family. But the word family felt like a bruise now painful to touch, impossible to ignore. Inside the courthouse, the air was cool, humming with the low murmur of voices and the shuffle of papers. The walls echoed with the kind of silence only legal buildings have, a mix of dread urgency and the weight of truth waiting to be spoken. We reached the hallway outside courtroom 2C. Lydia stopped, turned to me, and rested a hand on my arm. One more reminder. They will try everything today: guilt, tears, anger, manipulation. You stay silent unless the judge asks you a direct question. Understood? Yes. Good. Let's take our seats. When the clerk opened the door, we entered. The room was modest, wood-paneled walls, rows of benches, a raised judge's bench. But something about it felt enormous. Like what happened inside would echo far beyond its walls. My parents and Savannah filed in seconds later. Savannah avoided my eyes. My mother dabbed her face with a tissue already damp. My father scanned the courtroom as if looking for an angle, a weakness, a lever to pull. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Judge Hartley was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, radiating quiet authority. The kind of woman who would see right through excuses. You may be seated, she said, settling behind the bench. The clerk announced the case. Coleman versus Coleman. Emergency injunction hearing. My heart thudded once loud, solid, final. Lydia stood. Good morning, Your Honor. Lydia Grant for the plaintiff. Miss Isabella Hayes. My parents' attorney, Mr. Barlow rose. Good morning, Your Honor, representing the defendants. The judge nodded. I have reviewed the written motion. Miss Grant, proceed. Lydia spoke with a steadiness that made me grateful I'd found her. Your Honor, my client's parents sold her $5 million beach villa while she was out of the country, using an illegally updated power of attorney forged with her signature. They misrepresented her mental state to the buyers and directed the notary not to verify identity. They also diverted the proceeds of the sale into multiple accounts owned solely by themselves and Miss Hayes's sister. She placed a binder on the judge's bench. We have documents, screenshots, banking records, expert signature analysis, and testimony available to support every claim. Mr. Barlow stood already bristling. Your Honor, this is a family dispute, a misunderstanding. The parents acted in good faith. Judge Hartley raised a hand. Do not offer conclusions, provide facts. Your Honor, he tried again. They believed they had authority. The question she cut in is whether they had authority. Continue, he faltered. The updated power of attorney, which is contested as forged, Lydia reminded him. Judge Hartley turned to Barlow. Do you have evidence proving the document is authentic? Barlow hesitated. That single pause said everything. Lydia stepped forward. Your Honor, if it pleases the court, we can provide the forensic expert now. Judge Hartley nodded. Proceed. Dr. Ellery took the stand and swore in. When Lydia handed him the enlarged prints of my signature, he walked the court through the differences, the tremor, the pressure inconsistencies, the tracing marks. This signature is forged, he said clearly, without question. Savannah's face drained of color. My mother let out a soft gasp. My father clenched his jaw until the muscle jumped violently. Barlow stammered. But perhaps my client— No speculation, the judge snapped. Lydia shifted gears. Your Honor, the buyers have provided emails in which the defendants describe my client as emotionally unstable, mentally unfit, and unable to handle legal communication. Judge Hartley's eyebrows lifted. Is that true, Mr. Barlow? He swallowed. The parents may have exaggerated concerns. Exaggerated, Lydia echoed sharply. They claimed my client was incapable of understanding documents. They instructed the buyers not to contact her. They fabricated a mental condition to bypass her consent. The judge looked at my parents now, not kindly. Did you represent your daughter as mentally unfit to the buyers? My father straightened. We said what we needed to say to protect the sale. She was emotional, irrational. The judge leaned forward. That is not a mental incapacity. That is your opinion. He started to argue, but her raised hand stopped him cold. And did you, she continued, fail to notify your daughter of the sale before executing it? My mother's lips trembled. We didn't want to worry her. She was traveling. The judge stared at her for a long moment, disbelief etched into every line of her face. Miss Grant, the judge said, based on what I've heard so far, I am inclined to grant the injunction. Do you have additional evidence? Lydia nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Financial abuse. Patrice took the stand next, presenting the flowchart. 14 months of withdrawals, all unauthorized, all from me. The judge listened, jaw tightening. When Patrice detailed the gambling accounts, my parents' faces collapsed into a mixture of shame and panic. Finally, the judge spoke. I have heard enough. Everyone held their breath. This court finds strong preliminary evidence of fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, and financial abuse. Effective immediately, all accounts connected to the sale, direct and indirect, are frozen. My mother gasped a sharp, high sound. Savannah shook her head violently, whispering, No, no, no. My father slammed a hand on the table. You can't. We'll lose everything. The judge stared down at him calmly. You should have considered that before forging signatures and selling property that did not belong to you. Silence fell like a gavel. Court is adjourned until the full hearing, Judge Hartley said. Miss Hayes, you are dismissed. When we exited the courtroom, my mother rushed toward me, tears streaming. Isabella, please help us fix this. I walked past her without stopping. Savannah grabbed my arm. You destroyed us. Lydia stepped between us. Remove your hand. Savannah let go immediately. My father's voice followed me, breaking desperate, furious. You'll regret this. I didn't even turn around. Outside sunlight hit my face so brightly it made my eyes sting, not from tears, from relief. Lydia exhaled beside me. That was a clean win. Yes, I whispered. The first of many, because the truth wasn't done yet. Not even close. The courthouse parking lot was already half empty when Lydia and I stepped outside, but my mind was louder than any traffic or rustling leaves. The injunction hearing was over. Their accounts were frozen. And now the real war was shifting into its next phase, the one where everything they'd hidden, lied about, and stolen would finally be dragged into the light. Lydia unlocked her car and nodded toward the passenger seat. We're not done, not even close. Today gave us leverage. Tomorrow we build the case. I slid into the seat, my pulse still thudding in my ears. What happens now? We gather everything she said, every text, every lie, every withdrawal, every signature. Today was the blow that stunned them. Now we follow through. Her calmness steadied me in a way nothing else had in days. Back at her office, the conference room was already lit, Patrice and Dr. Ellery waiting inside like reinforcements. Their faces didn't show celebration. They showed readiness. The kind of readiness that comes right before dissecting a crime scene. Patrice spoke first. Now that the judge froze the accounts, your parents and sister will scramble. We need to move faster. Dr. Ellery slid a new set of printed documents toward Lydia. And we have more. Lydia raised an eyebrow. More, he nodded. The notary came forward. My stomach clenched. Why? Patrice answered. Guilt, maybe fear. But he sent a statement. Along with footage. Footage, I repeated, pulse kicking up. Lydia opened the file and the screen at the end of the table flickered to life. Grainy security footage played inside a small office with a stamped seal on the wall. And there they were, my mother, my father, Savannah. Savannah holding a pen. My father hovering over her like a coach. My mother glancing around the room, her fingers twitching like she was waiting for a police siren to scream through the walls. Savannah hesitated, staring down at the document. My father leaned closer, tapping the paper. Tighter on the S. She curves it sharper. Savannah bit her lip, then slowly, deliberately began drawing my signature. My signature. My breath punched out of me. This is them. This is everything. Lydia didn't look away from the screen. This is the nail in the coffin. Savannah lifted the pen at the end and looked at my mother. Is it good enough? She asked, voice trembling. My mother exhaled in relief. It'll do. My father reached for the document. Stamp it, he told the notary off camera. She gave us permission. The video ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick, suffocating. Then Lydia exhaled slowly. They just handed us evidence of felony forgery. On camera. I pressed a hand against my ribs. They knew. They all knew what they were doing. Patrice nodded grimly. And now your sister is just as legally exposed as your parents. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead a strange sort of clarity washed over me, like grief melting into something steadier. Resolve. Lydia clicked off the screen. We'll use this in the full hearing. And now we prepare the rest. She motioned me toward the table. Sit. Let's go through the timeline from the start. Every conversation, every red flag. We worked for hours. I told them about every uncomfortable conversation over the past 2 years. The times my father said I didn't need a house that big. The times my mother called me selfish for not paying Savannah's rent. The night Savannah texted me for money, begging, demanding, insisting. The subtle digs, the guilt, the dismissals. Lydia took notes fast enough to dent the pen. They've been conditioning you for years, she said softly. It stung because it was true. Patrice pulled up more records, payments labeled with lies, transfers disguised under vague excuses, even a few transactions that happened while I was overseas. They were bold, Patrice said. Brazen? The kind of confidence people have when they think they'll never be questioned. I tried to swallow, but my throat was tight. What happens now? Now Lydia leaned forward. Now we subpoena everyone. Everyone, the realtor, the buyers, the notary, banking officials, the loan company, anyone who touched this mess. My heartbeat scattered like loose pages in a storm. That's a lot. It has to be, she said. Your parents built this scheme layer by layer. We're tearing it down the same way. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then slid it toward me. It's starting, she said. A text from an unknown number. You think freezing our accounts makes you powerful. You have no idea what you've done. Then another. Fix this. Or you'll lose everything too. My stomach twisted. This is either my father or Savannah. Doesn't matter, Lydia said. It's intimidation. Which helps us? I blinked. Intimidation helps us, yes. Because it shows intent and emotional coercion. She typed something quickly. Forward all of these to me. Every single one. I did. A few minutes later, I stepped onto her office balcony, needing air. The city stretched below cars, moving like tiny sparks lights flickering on office towers. From up here, Austin looked peaceful. Steady. But I didn't feel steady. I felt hollow, and furious, and tired, and something else entirely. I heard footsteps behind me. Lydia joined me, leaning her forearms on the railing. You're doing incredibly well, she said quietly. Doesn't feel like it. It rarely does when you're fighting people who raised you. I let out a shaky breath. How do I face them in court again? You won't be facing them, she said. You'll be facing the truth. There's a difference. I looked down at the streetlights. I keep thinking about all the times I helped them. Lent money, covered bills, did everything they asked, and that still wasn't enough. Lydia nodded. It was never going to be enough for people who believe your life belongs to them. Her words hit hard because they were exactly right. She turned to me. Tomorrow we bring in the forensic accountant from the loan company, and the buyer's full statement, and the notary himself. I closed my eyes. Okay, and Isabella, I opened them. "You're not fighting to punish them," she said. "You're fighting to protect the part of you they tried to destroy." A lump formed in my throat. I nodded. We walked back inside. Patrice was packing her files. Dr. Ellery was closing his portfolio. Lydia was already typing an email. "We'll reconvene at 8 tomorrow," she said. Got it. I gathered my things and left the office, stepping into the quiet hallway. By the time I reached the parking garage, the sky had darkened completely. The city lights shimmered, reflected in the rain-slick pavement. I paused, inhaled deeply, and slid into the back of my rideshare. My phone buzzed again. "Mother, why are you doing this to us? We're your family." "Father, fix this now. Or we will." "Savannah, you're not the victim. You're the villain." I didn't reply. I took screenshots, sent them to Lydia, then turned off my phone. As the car pulled out of the parking lot, I stared at the blurred reflections of headlights running down the wet windows. I used to think losing my family would be the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. Losing myself to them would have been worse. And now I was reclaiming every piece they'd tried to take. Tomorrow would be another battlefield. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I felt something like strength settle in my chest. I wasn't done. I wasn't defeated. I was finally becoming someone they couldn't control, and they had no idea how much that scared them. The morning of the forensic review felt heavier than the days before, like the air itself understood what was coming. I walked into Lydia's office, clutching a paper cup of bitter motel coffee, my stomach rolling with nerves I couldn't seem to swallow. Patrice and Dr. Ellery were already inside the conference room, both seated, both serious. Their expressions alone told me that today's findings wouldn't just sting, they would scar. "Morning, Isabella," Lydia said softly. "Sit. We have a lot to cover." I sat down, my palms damp against the cool surface of the conference table. Patrice tapped her tablet, and the wall monitor lit up, displaying a new spreadsheet. "A bigger one, a darker one. We expanded the search," she said. "We reviewed your sister's outstanding debts, and your parents' accounts, and the lenders they've been using." My pulse tightened, and I whispered. Patrice inhaled. "Your sister's debt is significantly larger than what we originally believed." "How much?" "About $70,000. The number hit like a visceral blow, sharp, staggering, disorienting. 70. My voice broke on the word. "Mostly gambling," Patrice continued gently. "Some predatory loans, some high-interest card advances." I stared at the screen. Bars marked DEBTOD glared back at me like an accusation. "And they refinanced their house," Lydia said quietly, placing another document in front of me. Twice, my lungs squeezed. "I didn't know any of this. They never said anything." "They didn't want you to know," Lydia replied, "because once you knew they couldn't control the outcome." Control. That word felt like a chain tightening around my throat. Patrice shifted to another tab. "And this is where you come in." Rows of transactions slid into view, small withdrawals, steady, precise. These amounts, she said, paid interest on Savannah's gambling debt, and some payments went directly to the lender. She pointed at the right column, the one labeled Source Account. My name stared back at me over and over. "They used my money to cover her gambling, yes. They drained me," I whispered, quietly, consistently. Patrice nodded slowly. "This wasn't a slip, it was a strategy." My vision blurred, not from tears but from a hot, shaking fury. "How long?" I asked. "Over a year. A year of lies, a year of quiet theft, a year of telling me everything was fine while my accounts bled behind my back." I gripped the armrests of my chair. "What happens if they don't pay these lenders now that the accounts are frozen?" "They'll default," Patrice said plainly, "which means the lenders will pursue them aggressively." My stomach twisted, because even after everything, part of me didn't want them hurt. Just stopped. "Come on," Lydia said gently, snapping me from the spiral. "There's more we have to review." More, my voice was barely sound. "Yes, and what comes next is critical." Dr. Ellery stood and laid two papers on the table, the forged power of attorney and my real signature from my trust documents. We've expanded analysis, he said. And now we can say with certainty this forgery was done by someone who has copied your handwriting before. A beat of silence filled the room. Savannah, he continued, the person practiced your signature multiple times before committing to the forgery. How do you know? I asked numbly. These slip marks, he pointed. These pressure points. And this is a classic practice loop. The loop of the S in my name was a childhood memory one Savannah used to mimic to tease me when we were teenagers. She forged it, I whispered. She didn't just help them. She did it. Lydia met my eyes. Are you prepared for her to be held responsible? I swallowed hard. I don't know. You don't have to decide that today, she said. But understand this, your sister is not a passive victim. She is an active participant. Every bit as accountable. My throat tightened. I keep trying to understand. Why didn't they just ask me for help? They knew you would help, Lydia said, but you would help with boundaries, conditions, oversight. Patrice nodded. They didn't want support. They wanted control. Control again. The pattern was unmistakable now exposed under harsh fluorescent lights. A knock sounded on the door. Carrie leaned in. Isa, there's someone here. The loan company. My breath caught. The lender Lydia nodded. Good, bring them in. A man in a gray suit entered, smooth hair, sharp eyes, professional neutrality. He introduced himself, sat down, and handed over a folder. We were contacted by your parents, he began. They inquired about restructuring your sister's debt. They used the forged POA to justify using your accounts. I stared at him. They told you they had power over my finances. Yes, he said. And they signed documents claiming you were aware. Lydia's jaw tightened. Can you testify absolutely? The word felt like oxygen. He rose, handed me a business card, and left. Isa, Lydia, said her voice softer, gentler. This is a mountain of evidence. Enough to win in court. Enough to protect you. Enough to expose them. I know, I said, but my voice cracked, because another truth hit me, one I hadn't been ready to admit. They were drowning. Yes, Lydia said, but instead of reaching for a life raft, they tied you to the sinking ship. I pressed my hands to my face, breathing slowly. I thought about every birthday party, every holiday, every time I covered Savannah's messes. Every lie my parents told to excuse her choices. Every moment they'd looked at me like I was made of steel, unbreakable, responsible for everything. They used me because they thought I'd never fight back, I whispered. Lydia nodded. But you are fighting back. The rest of the day blurred into hours of paperwork, signatures, expert statements, and legal strategy. At one point, Patrice took my phone and uploaded every message my family had sent, every threat, every manipulation. At 6 p.m., Lydia packed the final binder and placed it in front of me. This, she said, tapping it, is the armor you never had before. I closed my fingers around the binder's edge. What happens tomorrow, Lydia? Said you face them again. And this time the evidence is on your side. I walked out of the office as dusk settled over the city, the sky deep blue and soft. Traffic hummed far below. The air tasted like possibility, sharp and cool. My phone vibrated. Savannah, I swear, if you keep going, I'll lose everything. Another, you're heartless. Another, you did this to us. I turned the phone off, slipped it into my bag, and kept walking. Let them unravel. Let the truth surface. Tomorrow everything would shift again. But tonight, standing under the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Strength. Mine, not theirs. And I wasn't giving it back. The motel room felt darker than usual when I woke, like the morning light was hesitant to enter a place carrying this much tension. I hadn't slept, not really. My mind kept looping through every document, every signature, every lie I'd uncovered. By the time my alarm buzzed, I already sat fully dressed at the small table, hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee I'd forgotten to drink. Today was the full hearing. Today everything would be said, not in whispers, not in text messages, not stuffed into envelopes without signatures, but out loud under oath in front of a judge who didn't care about family roles or emotional theatrics. I took a slow breath, stood, and grabbed the binder Lydia had given me yesterday. It felt heavier now, as if it had absorbed the weight of all the truths I was finally ready to face. The rideshare dropped me at the courthouse steps. Lydia was already waiting at the entrance wearing a charcoal suit sharp enough to cut through steel. When she saw me, she gave one short nod. "You ready?" "Yes." That was a lie, but readiness wasn't a requirement for justice. We walked inside together. The hallway was buzzing with the kind of quiet noise that happens only in courthouses. Paper, shuffling, low murmurs, nervous pacing. People hoping for their lives to be fixed or at least less broken. My parents were already there. My mother's eyes were red, swollen, but her chin lifted when she saw me, as if pain were just another tool in her belt. My father looked stiff, angry, contained only by the presence of law around him. Savannah stood between them, arms crossed her face, pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept either. When I approached, my mother reached out a trembling hand. "Isabella, please, we can talk. We can still fix this." I didn't reach back. Lydia stepped forward. "Miss Coleman, my client is not to be approached. Please step back," Savannah snapped. "She's our sister, not your property." Lydia stared her down. "She is my client, and today she will not endure your manipulation." My father's jaw twitched. Unbelievable. The disgrace. Bringing outsiders into Sir Lydia cut him off. "You forged documents. Outsiders are now your reality." Before anyone could argue, the bailiff opened the courtroom door. Case 47CV992, Hayes versus Coleman. All parties inside. My parents stiffened. Savannah swallowed hard. Lydia placed a steady hand on my back. "It's time," she said. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the hallway. The Judge Hartley, again took her seat with a calm that made my heart slow just a little. She looked capable of slicing through any performance, any deception, any sentimental manipulation. Everyone rose, then sat. "Counsel," she said, "you may proceed." Lydia stood. She didn't waste time. "Your Honor, over the last 6 weeks we have uncovered overwhelming evidence that my client's parents and sister engaged in coordinated fraud, forgery, financial abuse, and misrepresentation to sell her $5 million beach villa without her consent while she was out of the country." She placed a stack of binders on the bench. These include notarized statements, banking records, expert analysis, and security footage of the forgery itself. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. My parents' attorney, Mr. Barlow, scrambled to his feet. "Your Honor, if I may." "No," Judge Hartley said without looking up. "You may not." "Sit." He sat. Lydia continued. "Additionally, we will demonstrate a long-term pattern of financial exploitation, including siphoned funds, hidden accounts, predatory loan involvement, and emotional coercion." Each phrase landed like a stone. My mother dabbed her eyes dramatically. Savannah rolled her eyes at the judge, which didn't help their case at all. My father stared straight ahead, jaw locked. Then Lydia called me to the stand. My heart stuttered, but I rose. I walked to the witness chair, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. "Miss Hayes," Lydia began gently, "can you tell the court what happened the day you returned from Paris?" I breathed deeply and spoke. "I arrived home and saw movers loading my belongings into a truck. They told me my villa had been sold. I didn't know anything about a sale. My parents texted me calling me homeless and telling me to stop being dramatic." My mother gasped loudly. The judge shot her a look that silenced her instantly. Lydia asked, "Did you authorize the sale?" "No." "Did you give your parents permission to use your power of attorney for real estate?" "No." "Did you know it had been updated?" "No." "And did you sign that update?" "No." "Thank you," Lydia said. No further questions. Barlow approached with a practiced, sympathetic smile. "Miss Hayes, isn't it true that your parents have always supported you, that they only wanted to help your sister?" I've always supported them, I said. Financially, emotionally, constantly. He blinked. That wasn't the answer he wanted. And perhaps he said, "You don't remember signing the POA update. I remember every legal document I've ever signed," I said. I did not sign it. He tried again. Is it possible you're misremembering? No, I said softly, but your clients are. The courtroom murmured again. The judge offered no reaction, but her eyes sharpened slightly, approval hidden beneath neutrality. Next came the experts. Dr. Ellery walked the court through the forgery in meticulous detail. Pressure points, direction of strokes, hesitation marks, practice loops. Every piece of evidence pointed to deliberate tracing. That signature, he concluded, is not Miss Hayes's. It is an imitation, the judge nodded. Thank you, doctor. Then Patrice took the stand, laying out the financial abuse slide after brutal slide. Every withdrawal, every disguised payment, every gambling transfer, every predatory loan, every hidden account. Savannah flinched visibly when her gambling ledger was shown. My mother covered her face. My father stiffened like a man trying not to break. Then came the final blow, the buyers. Daniel and Marina took the stand and testified that my parents had told them I was mentally unfit, unstable, and unable to handle paperwork. The judge's face hardened. Is that true, Mr. and Mrs. Coleman? She asked. My mother whispered. We exaggerated. You lied, the judge corrected. My father lifted his chin. We were trying to protect the family. You were trying, the judge replied, to protect your access to money. Silence. Absolute devastating silence. When the notary testified next, admitting my parents told him I had approved everything and asked him not to verify my identity, the courtroom seemed to tilt. My mother began to cry again. Real tears this time. Savannah looked like she might faint. My father's hands shook for the first time. Finally, the judge spoke. We will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. I suggest all parties prepare. She struck the gavel. Court adjourned. Outside, my parents rushed toward me. Lydia stepped in front of me instantly, but I held up a hand. It's okay. My mother cried. Isabella. Please, we didn't mean. Yes, I said quietly. You did, and tomorrow you'll face the consequences. Savannah glared. You think this makes you strong? No, I said softly. It makes me whole. My father pointed at me, fury trembling in his voice. You'll regret this. We'll make sure of it. I met his eyes and felt nothing. You already did, I whispered. Lydia touched my arm. Let's go. As we walked away, the courthouse doors swung shut behind us, cutting off the echoes of everything I used to fear. Tomorrow would bring the verdict. But tonight, for the first time, I breathed like someone who finally knew her own worth. The courthouse looked different the next morning, as if the building itself understood that today everything would break open and nothing would ever be the same again. The sky hung low with gray clouds, heavy and unmoving, the kind that pressed down on the city like a warning. I stood on the courthouse steps with Lydia beside me, the binder of evidence clutched under my arm like a shield. You ready? She asked quietly. I took a breath that trembled only a little. Yes. We walked inside. My parents were already there, sitting stiffly on the bench outside courtroom 2C. My mother's face was blotchy, makeup smudged from crying. My father looked carved from stone, every muscle clenched. Savannah stood against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her stomach like she was holding herself together. Not one of them looked at me with love. Only fear, only anger, only desperation. The bailiff opened the door. All parties for Hayes v. Coleman, please enter. The courtroom filled with an anxious hum as we took our seats. The judge entered. Everyone rose, then sat. Today, Judge Hartley said, her tone crisp. We hear closing arguments. Counsel for the plaintiff proceed. Lydia rose with the calm of someone who had been preparing her entire life for this moment. Your Honor, she began, we have shown this court overwhelming evidence that my client was the victim of deliberate, coordinated fraud. Her property, valued at $5 million, was sold without her knowledge, without her consent, and against the legal protections of her trust. She held up a binder. We proved the signature on the power of attorney was forged. We proved her parents misrepresented her mental state. We proved funds were siphoned systematically from her accounts for over a year. And we proved that the defendants acted not out of necessity but entitlement. Her eyes flicked toward my parents. And entitlement is not a legal defense. She sat. The judge nodded toward the defense table. Mr. Barlow. He stood quickly smoothing his tie with a trembling hand. Your Honor, this is a tragic misunderstanding. A family matter blown out of proportion. The parents acted out of love desperation. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Barlow, do not insult this court by reframing fraud as love. He swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Proceed, she said. He tried again. My clients never intended harm. They were trying to protect their younger daughter by forging documents, the judge asked. Barlow hesitated. They panicked. Panicked is not forging your daughter's signature in a notary's office, the judge replied sharply. Sit. He sat. The courtroom fell into a tense silence, broken only by the judge flipping through the binder of evidence. Every turn of the page felt like a countdown. Finally, she set the papers aside. Stand, she ordered. My heart hammered once hard. My parents rose. Savannah rose. I rose. Judge Hartley took a breath. In the matter of fraud, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Isabella Hayes. My mother let out a broken sob. In the matter of forgery and misuse of power of attorney, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Savannah's knees buckled. She gripped the bench to stay upright. In the matter of financial abuse and misrepresentation, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. My father closed his eyes as if bracing for a blow that had already landed. The judge continued. The sale of the villa is void. Ownership returns to Miss Hayes immediately. All funds taken from her accounts must be repaid. Additionally, damages in the amount of $100,000 are awarded to the plaintiff for emotional distress, legal costs, and loss of use. My mother's hands flew to her face. We can't pay that, she cried. We'll lose everything. The judge's voice softened just enough to sound human, but not enough to excuse anything. You lost everything, she said, when you chose deception over honesty. This court merely exposes the truth. Then she looked at me directly, clearly. Miss Hayes, I hope today brings you peace. I managed a small nod. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Silence filled the room, and then everything happened at once. My mother grabbed the doorframe, sobbing. Isabella, please, please help us. How could you do this? Savannah pressed her palms to her temples. I'll go to jail. Do you get that I'll lose my job? My life. And it'll be your fault, my father pointed at me, his voice cracking with a mixture of fury and fear. You betrayed us. No anger rose in me, no guilt, not even satisfaction, just truth. You betrayed me first, I said quietly, and now you're facing the consequences of your own choices. Lydia touched my elbow. Let's go. We walked out of the courtroom together. My family's cries echoed behind me, but for once, I didn't turn back. Outside, the sky, which had been gray all morning, finally cracked open with sunlight. Warm, bright golden. I lifted my face toward it and let the light touch my skin. For the first time in months, I felt weightless, free. 2 days later, I stood in the doorway of my restored beach villa watching movers bring in the last of my belongings. The ocean breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying salt sun and the faintest hint of peace. This home wasn't just mine again. It was a symbol of everything I reclaimed: my autonomy, my worth, my voice. As the last box was placed inside, I stood alone in the living room, breathing in the familiar scent of sea air and wooden floors warmed by sunlight. The fear, the betrayal, the chaos, it all felt like a distant memory, now washed clean by the truth. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I hope you're okay. My mother. I didn't reply. Healing wasn't the same as forgetting, and forgiveness was not the same as permission. I stepped out onto the balcony, the waves glittering below. The world felt wide again, possible again, mine again. And if you've walked with me to the end of this story, I want to ask you something from the heart. Have you ever had to stand your ground against the people who believed you wouldn't fight back? Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you had? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own courage or your own battles, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are more stories ahead. Stories of justice, of redemption, of betrayal turned into power. Thank you for being here with me until the very end.